Hello, hi, it's Rev Pipster here, and looking at video 3 of Lies in Your False Bibles by King James Video Man. Obviously, he comes from a oneness perspective. He believes that Jesus is the Father, Jesus is the Son, Jesus is the Holy Spirit. They're all one person. And that could be one of the reasons why he's not actually dealing with any doctrinal issues as such here, but he is dealing with things from a King James onlyist perspective. It's quite interesting in many ways when you look at this with King James onlyism. The King James onlyist set the King James Bible as the standard. It wasn't the first English translation, but they set it as a standard. And they judge everything else by this one, and he's picking up words which don't have any doctrinal information in them at all. There's nothing going to change, whether the wheels fall off or whether they swerve off the hinges, off the spindle, or whatever it might be. They're not changing anything, as in whether Jesus is God or not, whether Jesus is the second person of a Trinity or not. But because the words used differ in a modern translation given in modern English, modern American English, compared to a 16th century early modern British English, is a major issue, and the modern version, the modern English word, the modern American English word, if you can call it English, because that differs from the British English of the 17th century. Apparently it's a lie. It's a lie, an evil lie. Okay. Anyway, let's look at what he's saying here. He turns to Mark chapter 1, verses 2 to 3. And he pulls up that in the King James it says, it quotes the prophets. It says, as it was written in the prophets. And the New American Standard says, according to the prophet Isaiah. It actually names Isaiah. Once again, he's judging by the King James. He's not going back to the Greek. He's judging by the King James quotation of two prophets from the Old Testament. He's not going back even to but it doesn't matter actually if he quotes from the Hebrew Old Testament or the King James Old Testament. You're dealing with Mark's Gospel, and Mark's Gospel was written in Greek. So the question is, do the majority Greek texts, when I talk about majority, I'm saying the vast number of them, do they say, mention Isaiah by name? Do they just refer to prophets general, then followed by the quotation? Or do they say Malachi thing? Or what's the consensus in all the Greek manuscripts and stuff that we have, all the readings from the manuscripts we have? And there is a sizable number of manuscripts and excerpts they found which actually do mention Isaiah. Obviously Isaiah is one of the prophets being quoted here, and obviously he's not the only prophet being quoted here. But being faithful to the text in front of the translation committee and to the part of the committee who are quoting or who are translating this, okay, there is clear evidence that Isaiah is named in several manuscripts. Being faithful to what's been written down, they've used the term prophet Isaiah. And yes, Isaiah is quoted there. He's not the only one. No, Malachi is as well. But one thing that he's not actually being honest. King James only doesn't tend to be consistent on this fact. Is that, let's read you from Matthew's Gospel. In Matthew's Gospel, Matthew chapter 27, we have verse see what the actual quote is. When it talks about the potter's field, where Judas was hung himself, and the 30 pieces of silver, which was a sign of the which was a sign being thrown in the temple, another sign of the Messiah, were then used to buy this field. And there was a quote. It said, and verse 9 of chapter 27, in the King James Bible, the 1611 text, and in the modern editions of the King James, says the same thing. Wherefore the field was called the field of blood unto this day. Verse 9, then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, and they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him that was valued, whom they of the children of Israel did value. Okay, and it says it's Jeremiah the prophet, but the quote, and it's even in the King James margin, the quote is Zechariah. I'm yet to hear a Bible-believing Christian who is a non-King James exclusive. I'm not saying there isn't one. I'm sure there are some who make the same mistake, get this wrong, but I'm yet to hear of one to turn around and say the King James Bible is lying to us. Evil, evil lies. And to turn around and say, you people who read the King James, you're going to burn in hell because you are rejecting the word of God, because the King James Bible is full of lies. That's not done. You're doing it to us because we are not King James exclusive. And I'm just saying that I haven't heard, and I would object to anyone to turn around and then use that argument against the King James onlyists. Certainly, for sure. But the King James Bible makes the same mistake. Where's the consistency? Of course, the King James Bible is perfect to the King James onlyist, so it can't be making such mistakes. Okay, but the King James translators had Greek texts, Erasmus, Stephanus, Beza, all the Erasmus ones, and they saw that, and they were faithful in translating what was there as best they could, as best as their understanding. Of course, we've learnt more about how to translate Koine Greek in the time since 1611. Okay, and they've just been faithful as to what was in the manuscripts beforehand, or they've looked to other translations, to the Vulgate, to Wycliffe Bible, to the Bishop's Bible, to the Geneva Bible, to Tyndale Bible. It's mainly, from what my understanding is, Tyndale and the Geneva, which are very influential English translations in producing the King James. Okay, that's what they've done. Where's the consistency? Okay, both groups are faithful. I feel that it's a valid argument to say that if there is sufficient evidence to actually name Isaiah, then the New American Standard translators were justified in putting Isaiah in there to be faithful to what that is. That is translation. That is the difference between translation and interpretation. Okay, in translation, you do your best to find the closest words and meanings, etc., to what's actually there, rather than saying, "Well, this is what I think should be there," just like what Beza did with certain passages in his Greek text, and the same defence we give to the King James, but you're not doing this. You're not doing that same value with us. The King James is perfect, so Mark chapter 1 is wrong. It's an evil lie in the New American Standard Version, but it's absolutely understandable and okay in the King James when it comes to Matthew 27 verse 9. That's not consistent. Thank you very much. Let's look now at Exodus 14:25. Okay, the King James says that God caused the wheels to fall off the chariots. Okay, and the New American Standard Bible says he caused the chariot wheels to swerve. He's still talking about the wheels. Okay, the context hasn't changed. He's still talking about. He's not saying the chariots are swerving all over the place. Why are they? What's happening to the wheels? They're coming off. Why? Because they're swerving off. They're swerving off the axles. Okay, there's no different. It's just a different word being used. Okay, Exodus was written originally in Hebrew. It was translated again into Greek many centuries later, into the Greek Septuagint, before the birth of Christ, I should point out, a long time before the birth of Christ. And so with all that information, with the Hebrew and the Greek, saying what was going on, I don't think a mistake could have been made as to what the word actually meant there. Okay, and the New American Standard Bible translators chose to use the word swerve. It's because it's still talking about the wheels, and it's still talking about them coming away from the original path. The wheels are swerving off. Okay, not the chariot swerving. The wheels are swerving off, which would basically mean, you know, it fell off. It'd be like, if you've got children, you've got a little dinky car or matchbox car, whatever, and the wheel gets bent off and points in a different direction. It's swerved. Okay, there's nothing. It's not a lie to use a synonym like that. Well, of course you do, because it differs from the King James, which you set as the standards. And your response to this is, of course, it's evil lies. But it's different things. It's quite interesting that if we're talking about Koine Greek and comparing Greek manuscripts, okay, you can it seems, you know, because you discard the Greek, it doesn't matter if you have older manuscripts closer to the time. You can go back and check them. Okay, but you can't do that with the King James Bible. You can only go back to the 17th century, and you compare to that one. You can't go back further than that still. And yet, of course, when it suits your own purposes, when it does suit your own purposes, you will, like all King James onlyists do, to a large extent, either dig their heels in and say, no, this isn't going to happen, or a lot of them will revert in some way or another. Even Sam Gipp does. Even Sam Gipp consults Greek lexicons, etc., when it suits his own purposes to support his own doctrinal beliefs. They will go back to the Greek to do so. It's hypocrisy. There's no consistent standard in this at all, and there you go. There are other videos, quotations on here. I'm going to come on to them later on, and try and give a reasoned apologia, a reasoned defense for these verses. You can choose to accept them, choose can't. I can't make you do it any other way, but this sort of argumentation taking out words that have, you know, just because the meaning of the words have changed, so alternate words have been used in modern English, comparing a modern English, a modern American English translation of scriptures and a 17th century early modern English. In British English translation, these arguments are flawed, facially flawed, and do more in fact to harm the King James Bible, which, yes, a foundation stone, certainly I see it, in a high standard in how you translate the Bible in a good way, and a very probably the most influential book in the English language as far as the development of the English language goes. It does that more harm than I think it actually does support the Bible in general. Thanks for listening.